So if you have a property that you're looking to sell, should you sell it or should you do what's called a 1031 exchange, which is a tax-exempt exchange where you can roll that into another property and defer those gains? Sometimes when looking at problems, it can feel like a Rubik's Cube, right? Like we're trying to kind of solve this thing and not quite sure all the different movements and things you have to do to be able to solve it. But the nice thing is you really only have two choices, right? Either you're going to do a 1031 and you're going to pull off this tax-exempt exchange, or you're going to sell the property and you're going to just reinvest or do whatever else you want to do with that money. So we're going to jump into that. We're going to jump into this topic. It's a topic I love talking about. Please go and smash that like button. Got a great quote for you at the end, and let's get started. Alrighty, so to start us out, let me give a little disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor or your advisor. I don't know your situation. Please consult your own professionals, real estate and tax professionals before making any moves. This is only educational in my experience. First of all, how does a 1031 exchange really work? So I'm going to explain just a little bit of the process and some of the high level of how this actually works. So a 1031 allows you in the tax code to take a property that you sell. You basically have an accommodator or a third-party group that will take the funds and will hold that for you for a period of time until you can identify a new property and prepare to close on a new property. It allows for like-kind investments. So what that means is if you have a rental property, it allows you to go into another rental property. You cannot take your own personal house and basically sell that and then 1031 it into another house or into a rental property, right? Because it's not like kind. Those are not really like kind investments. So, in general, when it comes to, deferring capital gains, that's kind of the reason people do 1031. So let's say you have a house that you bought for $500,000. It's worth $1 million right now. You got $500,000 in gains. Maybe it was a rental house. You're like, dude, I've got all this money here. I'd love to sell it. But if I sold it, I have to pay all these taxes on it. So this allows you basically to take that money and defer it into a larger deal. Now, I know someone who has effectively done this over the last 25 years, has started with a duplex, and now they've got a $400 million real estate portfolio. This strategy can really work. If you can pay less or no taxes or just simply continue to defer down the road, the strategy really works. So one thing with 1031s is when you close on your first property, obviously this third-party accommodator has to hold the funds. They typically charge between $750 and $1,500 for that process. If you're talking a single-family house, if it's commercial, there's more fees. It can be substantially more expensive than that. But that's generally how it will work. They'll hold this money. You'll have up to 45 days to identify a new property. So you've got to identify a new property. You can identify up to 3 new properties, and then you'll have 6 months to be able to close. So again, these timelines can be very tight, and if you don't make them, then it just goes to capital gain. So you can always try it if it doesn't work. But again, my hope for you is that you will go through this process correctly. You'll say, this is how I'm going to go about this. This is my plan of attack. You'll do it a particular way, and you'll be able to get it done if that's your goal. So now we're going to talk about the other side if you were just to sell the property and just really take the gains. Okay, so the second consideration is just, well, what if I just sell this property, right? If I don't 1031, I don't want to bother with it, I just sell the property. And that's absolutely, you're right, it's your prerogative, it's your option, you can totally do it, there's nothing wrong with that, it's just something, it's an option, right? So if you sell it and you take the gains, let's talk about an example of this, right? So if you have a small multifamily apartment, let's say it's a $2 million property. So the property is worth $2 million, you have $1 million in gains on it, they're long-term gains. Let's say you sell that property and you get taxed, and for your state and your federal, let's just say your tax rate for math purposes is 25%. That means on that $1 million, you will have net $750,000 and you'll pay $250,000 in taxes. Which to me, that's a lot of money to pay in taxes, right? If you had the option to be able to avoid those taxes, I think it's really important. I actually had this happen recently where I was looking at, okay, do I take the money or do I not? And I just realized it just made so much more sense to 1031 into the next property so I could basically save on a lot of those gains for the future. So that's definitely a consideration. Now, there are some considerations as well that if you cannot find another property, right? You're looking around, oh my gosh, I just can't find anything. And, it can be a little tricky, especially in this market these days where things are so competitive, right? So that's a consideration. Another one is maybe you have to sell right now because of a family member or your partners in here. Maybe your partners or your family members don't want to go to the next deal with you. So that's a consideration. There is a possibility, if it's enough equity in the deal, you could potentially 1031 part of it or cash people out or do different things. There are creative things they can do with 1031s that if not all the partners want to move on, you can actually are able to do that. So what I would say in general is one approach is to try the 1031, just get it set up, pay the fee, do it, and then you look around and see what you can find. Now, if you can't find it in single family, if you can't find it in kind of what the asset that you're doing, you can look at commercial. We allow for people to come into our deals, multifamily syndication deals, if they have over $500,000 in equity that they're bringing. We've had a couple investors do that recently. There's some fees involved, but in general, it's a pretty awesome way that people can get access to great deals. And we're not the only ones that do it. There are other groups that do it. There's other commercial groups that do it as well. So just something to consider as you're selling. If you're having trouble finding a replacement property, that's something you can definitely look at. So that's, I guess, your option of selling. And then we're going to talk about some other considerations. All right. So what are some other considerations when it comes to a 1031 exchange, right? So there's other things. If you've never done this before, you don't know quite what to expect. So some other considerations that are important is that when you are going into the next property, one of the challenges is that the person who's selling you that property, they're going to know that you are at a 1031 exchange and you're on a tight timeline. Now, why is that important? It's important because it gives you actually a pretty significant disadvantage, right? They know that, hey, if this deal doesn't close, then you're going to be penalized because this is one of the properties you've identified. So what they can do is they can come back and say, oh, we're not going to work with you in this way. We want you to pay additional things here. We're not going to have any concessions as far as anything with the house or the property. So again, it really, people can really take advantage of that. You're really at their mercy because they know that you have to close this soon or else you're going to have this big tax bill. So that's just something to consider. There is another way to do it that a friend of mine has used for years and years, a friend that I mentioned earlier, who's gone from a duplex to many, hundreds of multifamily units, is that you identify the new property first before you sell the current property. So what does that actually look like? What that means is basically you have the new property, you get it under contract, and you'll have, you'll basically say, I have some extensions built in here. So you can say, I'm going to close in 45 or 60 days, but then you're going to say, I'm going to make additional money hard, or I'm going to make it guaranteed, or I'm going to make it non-refundable after a certain period of time. So this seller, the person you're buying from, knows that the property is going to close, right? They're not concerned, hey, this guy's really not going to close. They're not going to make it happen. So it allows you to, again, identify the new property first, and then basically then you can list your property and sell it, and you're going in at this already agreed upon price. So some markets obviously are easier to do this in than others. There are ways to make it happen. It is challenging, but it is a safer way to do a 1031. When a market is super hot, it can be really hard because people want cash offers. They want money right now. They want it right away. So it can be a little trickier, but it is possible as you look at larger deals when you see really what a seller is looking for, particularly on the commercial side or the larger multifamily side. So something to consider. Another consideration, some people have packages of single family homes or of a different asset. So there's a guy that I know in the Midwest who had 30 single family houses in the Midwest. He sold them together as a package. They're actually realtors that sell homes together as a package. So he sold these as a portfolio, and he took the funds, he put it, with an accommodator, did a 1031 exchange, and went into like a single person multifamily syndication. So that means he just took his equity here and put it over here. They bought a $10 million property. He had about $4 or $5 million in equity, and basically he gets much higher returns than he did before, and he doesn't have to manage all these properties, and it's in this larger property as well. Kind of like what I mentioned, I allow investors sometimes to come in at over 500,000 into some of our deals, and you'll find other operators will do similar depending on how much it is. But the issue really is timing. So making sure the timing is correct. Like we said, even you can put in a 1031 and then try to figure out where you're going to be able to put it. So that's kind of how that works. And then what I would say in general, when it comes to 1031s, one thing I try to do is defer, right? So if I can just continue to defer taxes. If I can defer taxes for the rest of my life and just keep deferring, it's going to be much, much, much better than every time I sell a property, I'm paying 25, 30%, whatever the amount is, right? That's going to really, really hurt my returns versus if I just kind of tax defer, I can also reinvest the money that I would have paid on taxes now. So there's a quote I want to share with you. This is by John Templeton, who started the Templeton Fund, great investor. He says, for all long-term investors, there's only one objective: maximum total return after taxes. So that's what he says. It's the return after taxes, right? What are you actually getting? What are you actually paying after taxes? And that's a very important consideration. I wanted to share this video with you that I'm really excited about. It's how millionaires are made. You can check it out up here. It just talks basically about, the steps that people that are very wealthy do. And so if you're interested in that, just kind of some steps, some things that you maybe have not considered, take a look at that video. And then I want you to put in the comments about 1031s. Have you done a 1031 exchange? Or, what are some concerns you have about 1031s? We have a great community around here, Bronson Equity. Just put that in there. It would really help our community just to have some comments in there, particularly for those that are experienced or those that have questions. Go ahead and put that below. If you are interested in hearing more, topics like this, such as real estate, inflation, macroeconomics, or other sorts of things going on in the world, particularly in regards to finance, consider subscribing to this video and consider sharing it maybe with a friend. But we'll look forward to seeing you on the next video.